The air in Chicago always felt sharper in the fall, but that day, it felt like a knife edge. 10 years. 10 years I'd poured my life into Apex Financial Solutions, building their security infrastructure from the ground up. From a scrappy startup handling pocket change data to a major player trusted with billions. My name is Chloe, and I was good at my job. Too good, apparently. When I first joined Apex, fresh out of a demanding program and disillusioned with the bureaucracy of bigger firms, it was just 50 people crammed into a noisy office. We had ambition but not much cash. Enterprise security solutions? A pipe dream. So, I built our defenses myself. Custom firewalls tailored to our unique data flows. Multi-layered segmentation to isolate client repositories. An anomaly detection system that learned our network's heartbeat. It was complex, sometimes held together with virtual duct tape and late-night caffeine, but it worked. For 9 years, while others in the sector had breach after breach, we were secure. Our reputation was built on it. The catch? Most of it was in my head and my notes. I'd asked, begged, demanded budget and time repeatedly to properly document everything, build out a dedicated knowledge base, and cross-train a larger team. 6 consecutive quarters. My proposals were denied, labeled non-essential administrative overhead by the board. Move fast, Chloe, we'll clean it up later. Later never came. The technical debt piled up, a silent weight I carried, knowing I was the only one who truly understood the intricate machine I'd built. Then Aegis Group acquired Apex. And with Aegis came Mason. Mason arrived like a tornado in a tailored suit. He was the new CTO, brought in from a Silicon Valley background that worshipped disruption and despised legacy systems. His mantra, repeated in every meeting, was move fast and break things. My careful, deliberate approach to security, built on the principle of not breaking things, especially not the trust of our clients, was an immediate obstacle to his vision. Our first executive briefing was a public dismantling of my decade of work. Mason stood at the front of the room, gesturing dismissively at slides summarizing my security protocols. These processes are cumbersome, he announced, his voice slick and confident. Frankly, they feel like security theater. We're losing agility. Our competitors are already twice as fast. We need to accelerate velocity, not get bogged down in, dare I say, paranoid levels of caution. He even used the word paranoid. My jaw tightened. I kept my voice level, fighting the tremor of fury. Mason, our clients trust us because we haven't had a breach. Financial data isn't like selling widgets online. The protocols are designed to mitigate specific, high-impact risks we've identified over years. He waved a hand, a dismissive flick of his wrist that erased a decade of my life. Risk is acceptable, Chloe. It's about recovery, not prevention. Everyone has breaches. I glanced around the room. The other team leads nodded along, avoiding my eyes. They knew he was wrong, but nobody dared contradict the new boss, the one with the ear of the acquiring company. Nobody but me, the architect watching her foundation being questioned by someone who didn't even know what rebar was for. Later, Riley, the lead for product development, caught me by the coffee machine. She looked stressed, lines etched around her eyes. That was rough, Chloe, she said, her voice low. He's pushing us too. Insane deadlines, cutting QA corners. It feels like we're building on quicksand. It is quicksand, Riley, I replied, the knot in my stomach tightening. And the faster you build, the faster it all sinks. The warning signs weren't subtle. Within weeks, Mason was systematically dismantling the very checks and balances I'd put in place. Security reviews were shortened to token gestures. Vulnerability scans were delayed, then quietly canceled. Budget requests for essential software updates were frozen. Then came the worrying messages. Lucas Chen, a junior IT staffer I barely knew but who seemed competent and quietly terrified, sent me an anonymous chat message one evening. Hey Chloe, been seeing some weird tickets from Mason's office. He's bypassing the standard change approval for firewall rules. Pushing changes directly. Fast. Another message followed a day later. Also consolidating the security logs, moving them to the Gen IT server. You flagged that system as not forensically sound like 3 years ago, right? Feels sketchy. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just ignoring my protocols, he was actively undermining them in ways designed to be invisible. I started working late again, not on new defenses, but on protection for my own knowledge. I began compiling screenshot after screenshot, Mason's directives and internal tickets, logs showing bypassed change management procedures, emails where my warnings were ignored. I also dug up the old budget requests, showing year after year of denied funding for documentation and cross-training, each marked non-essential. It felt like gathering evidence for a crime that hadn't happened yet, but was inevitable. Most importantly, I configured a separate, low-bandwidth, encrypted feed for my most critical custom anomaly detection alerts. It bypassed the internal monitoring systems Mason was messing with, sending notifications directly to a secure personal email and messaging app. It was a direct violation of company policy, borderline espionage, but my gut screamed that I would need it. It felt like preparing for a war I wasn't allowed to fight from the inside. The pressure mounted. Daniel, my senior security analyst, a smart kid I'd mentored for 5 years, came to me looking pale one afternoon. "Chloe, Mason just interrogated me about firewall updates," he said, running a hand through his hair. He was demanding workarounds to skip testing. Kept asking if there was a backdoor to push changes through in an emergency. I told him that's not how we do things safely, that it introduces unacceptable risk. He just said I was being obstructionist. My protective anger flared. They were putting my team in the line of fire. Then came the official warning from a client. Mr. Jonathan Harrison, the CIO of Evergreen Capital, one of our largest and most respected clients, sent a formal registered letter addressed to Apex's board, with copies explicitly directed to Alexander, the CEO, Mason, and me. The letter expressed deep concern about the perceived shift in Apex's security posture and requested an urgent, detailed security briefing, led by me, given my history of maintaining their data's safety. Mason's reaction, relayed to me by a tight-lipped Alexander, was swift and furious. He dismissed Mr. Harrison as an old-school warrior and insisted he would handle the briefing, claiming my legacy approach wouldn't reassure modern clients. I knew Mason didn't have the technical depth to answer Mr. Harrison's questions accurately, which only amplified my dread. The trust one had built, molecule by molecule, was being systematically eroded. The final straw snapped 2 days ago. Using my custom monitoring tools, the ones Mason was trying to sideline, I detected a sophisticated, targeted probing of our network perimeter. It wasn't a full-blown attack yet, but it was the kind of methodical reconnaissance that precedes one, a specific, dangerous signature I'd seen before. My system screamed high severity. I immediately began preparing a critical alert briefing for Mason and Alexander, compiling the data, the timestamps, the correlation with the recent, unauthorized changes. I was hunched over my keyboard, adrenaline surging, finalizing the report, when the calendar notification popped up on my screen. Security restructuring discussion, Chloe, my last name, Mason, Mason's last name, HR, 2 p.m. Conference room B. My fingers froze over the keys. 2 p.m. Just hours from now. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was deliberate. I knew exactly what this was. A cold certainty washed over me, overriding the adrenaline. This wasn't about restructuring my team. It was about eliminating me. Moving on autopilot, I finished exporting the data from my external monitoring feed, proof of the current probing activity, the stack of ignored alerts, everything correlated with Mason's changes. I encrypted it, sent it to my trusted personal cloud storage. This wasn't Apex data. It was my analysis, my observations, the story of their dismantling project. At 2 p.m. sharp, I walked into conference room B. Mason was already there, looking unnervingly calm, alongside Heather from HR, her face professionally neutral. The air was thick with unspoken context. "Chloe, have a seat," Mason said, his tone devoid of any warmth, any recognition of the decade I'd spent building this company. "I'll get straight to the point. As part of Aegis Group's strategic integration and our move towards a more agile operating model, we're restructuring the security operation model. We're transitioning to a more distributed approach, leveraging cloud-native tools and third-party management." He paused, letting the corporate buzzwords hang in the air. I said nothing, my gaze fixed on him. Heather's presence told me everything I needed to know. Your position as centralized security architect, he continued, his voice clinical, is being eliminated. We'll be embedding security functions within each product team moving forward. It's a more scalable, less dependent model. Less dependent, I repeated, the words tasting like ash. On what? On the systems that actually stopped breaches for 10 years. He didn't flinch. On tribal knowledge, Chloe. We need processes that are easily transferable, not reliant on a single point of failure. He practically air-quoted tribal knowledge, a little smirk playing on his lips. My decade of pouring my life, my expertise, my nights and weekends into building that system, because they wouldn't give me the resources to document it properly, reduced to a corporate anti-pattern, a liability. The audacity took my breath away. Heather slid a folder across the table. This outlines the severance package. 2 months' salary, extended health, accelerated vesting of equity. The numbers were substantial, objectively generous. It was hush money. Money to make me go away quietly while they dismantled everything. This decision had been made far above Mason's head. He was just the smiling executioner. We'll need your access cards and credentials today, Mason added, his tone firm. Daniel will handle any knowledge transfer based on the existing documentation over the next 2 weeks. You don't need to come in, but be available by phone. Daniel doesn't know the entire system, Mason, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Nobody does. Not like I do. The documentation is incomplete. Years of denied budget requests for proper knowledge transfer projects mean. Chloe, Mason cut me off, his patience wearing thin. Everything important is documented. We've reviewed your wikis and repositories. Your unique understanding and intuition aren't scalable in our new model. We're moving beyond reliance on individual knowledge. He leaned back, a final, dismissive gesture. He wouldn't listen. He couldn't understand. He was so blinded by his corporate mandate and his own perceived superiority that he couldn't see the precipice he was pushing the company towards. The critical alert data I had just collected burned in my mind. I understand, I said, closing the folder. The fight drained out of me, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. I took out a notepad and wrote down my critical passwords: domain admin, VPN, security console, monitoring systems. A decade of protecting billions, distilled into a few lines of text. I slid the notepad across the table. Mason nodded, picking it up. I know change is hard, Chloe, but this is the right direction for the company. Faster, leaner, more agile. I hope you're right, Mason, I said, standing up. For the sake of every client whose data you hold. I handed Heather my access badge. Walking out through the lobby, I passed the wall of framed awards and press mentions. Apex Financial Solutions, most secure financial data platform, 5 years running. My work. My legacy, now being discarded. I didn't feel anger, not yet. Just a profound sadness and a chilling certainty that they had made a catastrophic mistake. Not firing me. Companies reorganize. The mistake was thinking they understood what they were so carelessly dismantling. I got into my car. Instead of driving home, I drove to a spot overlooking the city skyline, Apex's gleaming building standing tall among the others. The fury finally hit me then, hot and sharp, followed by a wave of grief so potent it stole my breath. 10 years. My life. Dismissed as tribal knowledge by a man who wouldn't last a year. I pounded the steering wheel, a silent scream tearing through me. Then the grief subsided, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I pulled up the proof I'd gathered, the logs, the denied requests, Mason's directives, the current probing activity. I stared at it, calculating. How long before the storm hit? Not if. When? 2 days, I thought. Maybe less. I turned off my phone and sat there for hours, watching the lights come on in the city, each one a tiny point of vulnerability in a vast, interconnected world. 48 hours later, my personal phone, the one Apex no longer controlled, exploded. Missed calls, a barrage of frantic messages. The first one was from Daniel. Chloe, thank God. Systems acting weird. Multiple alerts triggering. Your old alerts, the custom ones, they're going crazy on my dashboard, but Mason says it's just system fluctuations from the restructuring. The IT team is lost. Nobody knows what's happening. Can you call? Please. My heart hammered against my ribs. It had started. Exactly on schedule, maybe even faster. Part of me, the hurt, angry part, wanted to ignore it. Let them drown in the chaos they created. Let Mason see what too careful actually prevented. But the decade of ingrained professional instinct, the responsibility I felt for the system I built, won out. I called Daniel back. Daniel? What's going on? His voice was raw with panic. Chloe. Oh, God. It's bad. Really bad. We've got unauthorized traffic patterns on the Eastern Gateway. It looks like a bypass. Your custom monitoring is screaming, but the standard system isn't showing anything critical. Mason's in meetings, and the IT team is trying to figure out if it's a false positive from the automated rule updates he pushed last week. Automated rule updates that bypassed my testing. Mason's streamlining had opened the door. Did anyone check the secondary verification logs? I asked, my voice tight. The backup system, the hidden dashboard I built during a weekend hackathon years ago, never formally integrated or documented, the one that cross-referenced alerts for legitimacy. Silence on the line. Then a confused whisper. The what? Where do I find that, Chloe? It's not in the handover docs. My stomach clenched. Of course it wasn't. That was the core of it, the undocumented layers, built out of necessity, now invisible to them. Okay, Daniel, listen carefully, I said, my mind racing. I walked him through accessing the hidden dashboard, the specific, non-standard credentials. Minutes passed, an eternity of silence broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. Then his voice, barely audible, filled with dawning horror. Oh God. Chloe, both systems, they're lit up. Like a Christmas tree on fire. Critical alerts everywhere. They were inside. Daniel, you need to isolate the Eastern Gateway immediately, I instructed. Power down the external connection. Fail over to the backup line. No. I can't, Chloe. His voice was a cry of despair. Mason removed our team's admin rights to the network hardware last week. Said it was redundant. Only senior IT has it now, and they're just staring at their screens, trying to find it in the manuals you left. My blood went cold. They didn't just dismiss my knowledge. They stripped away the means for anyone else on my team to act decisively in a crisis, centralizing power with people who were blind to the system's actual architecture. The sheer, terrifying incompetence of it. Daniel, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed fury and fear. You need to get Mason or Alexander. Right now. Tell them exactly what I told you. Tell them the auto-quarantine hasn't triggered. Tell them I'll be available if they contact me directly. But I am not coming in. Not anymore. The last words were harder to say than I expected, a mix of self-preservation and profound, bitter hurt. Please, Chloe. I don't know what I'm doing. We're lost. Call Mason, Daniel. Tell him he broke it. Tell him to call me. I hung up, my hand trembling. I stared at the alerts flashing on my personal screen, a horrifying play-by-play of the attackers breaching my internal segmentation layers, attempting lateral movement between client databases. The system I built was trying to fight back, but its hands had been tied by its new masters. 3 hours later, my phone rang again. It was Mason. His usual arrogant tone was completely gone, replaced by a tight, desperate edge. Chloe, we have a significant situation here. James. Daniel seems to think it's related to your old alerts. Our standard monitoring isn't showing much, but his dashboard is redlining. My old alerts, Mason? I said, my voice deliberately flat. The ones I warned you about? The ones you called paranoid? He cleared his throat, attempting to regain some composure. No one said security wasn't necessary, Chloe. We're restructuring how it's managed. We could use your insight. Maybe a phone consultation. You want me to consult on the security system you just decided wasn't necessary, that you systematically dismantled, that you fired me over? The irony was so thick it was suffocating. How's that restructuring working out for you so far, Mason? A beat of silence. Then, grudgingly, we're prepared to pay your contractor rate for assistance. I smiled grimly. This was it. The moment. My contractor rate, Mason, is $1,500 per hour. 4-hour minimum. Paid up front. In cash. Plus, I leaned into the phone, letting the steel enter my voice. A signed statement from Alexander and you, acknowledging that this breach is a direct consequence of the decision to disregard my warnings and dismantle the security infrastructure without understanding it. I expected outrage, sputtering, a flat refusal. Instead, after another pregnant pause, he simply said, his voice tight with absolute desperation, "I'll have the paperwork drawn up. How soon can you start?" "I can't, Mason," I replied, the satisfaction cold and sharp. "I've accepted a position with Guardian Defense Corporation. My severance agreement includes a non-compete clause that prevents me from accessing your systems now that I'm joining a different financial security firm." It was a lie. I hadn't accepted a job yet, and the non-compete had exemptions for consulting work. But Mason didn't know that. He had dismissed my knowledge, dismissed my warnings, and now, when he was drowning, that same knowledge was just out of reach. "Chloe, this is serious. Billions are at stake." "Yes, Mason," I agreed. "It is. You should have thought about that when you called me paranoid." I ended the call. Just as I hung up, my phone rang again. It was Alexander, the CEO. His voice was stripped bare of any corporate veneer, raw with panic. "Chloe, it's Steven." "Alexander. Please, whatever happened between you and Mason, we need your help. Right now. They're inside, moving between client databases. We can't stop them." "I heard," I replied, my voice calm despite the turmoil inside. "What's happening exactly?" "They bypassed the perimeter somehow. They're moving laterally." "Grant. Mason says something about the internal segmentation failing, but his team can't figure out how they're doing it or how to contain it." "The internal segmentation." "My custom-built data isolation system, designed specifically to prevent this kind of lateral movement. It was designed to automatically lock down if it detected unauthorized access patterns." "Has the auto-quarantine triggered?" I asked. Silence. Then confused, "The what?" "Auto-quarantine." My heart sank again. They didn't even know about the final layer of defense. "Alexander, there's an automatic quarantine system built into the segmentation controls. If unauthorized movement is detected, it should isolate each client database automatically." Muffled voices in the background. Alexander speaking to someone. Then Mason's voice cut in, frantic. "Marcus? Chloe, where exactly is this quarantine system? We can't find it in any of the infrastructure diagrams." "It's not in the diagrams, Mason," I said, weary. "It was implemented as an emergency measure during the security incident 3 years ago. The board approved it as a temporary solution that became permanent when funding for proper integration and documentation was repeatedly denied." More muffled conversation. "We're looking." "Yes, here it is. Approved emergency security measures, proposed by Chloe. But there are no technical details." Mason's frustration was palpable. "Can you just tell us how to activate it?" "It should activate automatically," I repeated. "If it hasn't, something's been changed in the configuration. A verification task might be disabled." Another long pause. Then Mason's voice, quiet, damning. "The task is there. It's disabled." "Who disabled it, Mason?" I asked, already knowing the answer, the proof sitting in my cloud storage. His reply was barely a whisper. It was disabled as part of the security restructuring. We consolidated scheduled tasks to reduce system overhead. Reduce system overhead. For that. The final, unforgivable act of ignorance. They had systematically dismantled my system, piece by piece, without the slightest understanding of how the parts worked together, how the undocumented layers were the crucial glue. And now, they were facing the consequences. While Apex's self-inflicted nightmare unfolded, my phone buzzed. A message on LinkedIn. Natalie Hayes, CTO at Guardian Defense Corporation. Guardian Defense was one of the top security firms in the country, known for handling major breach cleanups and building robust systems. I'd followed Natalie's work for years, admired her approach. The message simply read, "Heard you might be available sooner than expected. Word travels fast. We need someone like you. Coffee?" It felt like a lifeline thrown to me in the middle of a storm I had predicted. We met for coffee that afternoon. Natalie was sharp, direct, and immediately grasped the situation without me needing to explain much. "Word travels fast in our world, Chloe," she said, sipping her latte. Apex's situation is unfortunate. I don't know the details, of course. I'm not there. She gave me a knowing look. But I know your reputation. 10 years at Apex. No successful breaches. That's impressive. Until now. From what I hear, she continued, the breach happened after significant changes to their security architecture. Changes you didn't implement. She didn't ask how I knew. The security community was small, and certain kinds of news spread like wildfire. We're expanding our financial sector practice, Natalie said. We need someone who understands the unique challenges, someone who's built custom solutions and knows how to manage complex security infrastructures. Someone who values prevention as much as recovery. We need you, Chloe. The job offer was everything Apex wasn't. A senior leadership role, a team of dedicated engineers, double my Apex salary plus significant equity and resources, actual resources, for documentation, research, and development. When I mentioned the non-compete clause in my severance, Natalie smiled. Our legal team reviewed standard Apex agreements. The non-compete only applies to directly competing financial data services, not security consulting firms like us. We're not a competitor to Apex, Chloe. We'd potentially be a vendor to them. That evening, as I reviewed Guardian Defense's offer letter, my phone rang again. Riley. Her voice was trembling. Chloe, have you seen the news? I opened my laptop. The headlines were everywhere now. CNN, Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal. Apex Financial Solutions confirms catastrophic data breach. Tens of millions of client records exposed in Apex security failure. Apex stock plummets 35%. How bad, Riley? I asked, though I already knew. Bad, Chloe, she whispered. They got into at least 40 client databases before we managed to shut down external access completely. The internal systems, they're compromised. Nobody can figure out how to restore the security controls properly. It's chaos. What's Mason saying? Mason's not saying anything. He's in non-stop crisis meetings with the board. They've called in an external security firm for incident response. She didn't need to name them. I knew. Guardian Defense would be deciphering my custom architecture with no proper documentation. It would take them time. Time during which Apex's reputation would be shredded. I'm sorry, Riley, I said, and I meant it for her, for Daniel, for Lucas, for everyone caught in Mason's wake. It's not your fault, Chloe, she said, a sob in her voice. You tried to warn them. You tried so hard. The next morning, I signed Guardian Defense's offer letter. By noon, I was setting up my new equipment in their downtown Chicago office, a stark contrast to the panic across the city. My first task: help develop a post-breach recovery framework for financial institutions. The irony was not lost on me. That evening, I received one final text message. It was from Alexander. Chloe, the board would like to discuss bringing you back. Name your terms. I didn't reply. Some bridges, once burned down by arrogance and incompetence, are better left that way. Instead, I emailed Natalie the first draft of the recovery framework. The subject line, preventing the next Apex. 1 month after the breach, I was settling into my role at Guardian Defense when Bloomberg published a devastating investigative piece, titled The Dismantling of Apex: How Cost-Cutting Compromised Security. The article detailed how Apex's new management had systematically stripped away security controls in pursuit of faster development cycles and reduced overhead. Internal emails obtained by the reporters showed Mason ordering critical security mechanisms to be disabled or bypassed, despite warnings from the IT staff. Daniel and Lucas were quoted anonymously, describing how my custom security architecture had been dismantled by people who didn't understand its purpose or dependencies. The most damning revelation came from the board meeting minutes. The article explicitly detailed my repeated requests for budget for proper documentation and knowledge transfer of the security systems, 6 consecutive quarters, denied and labeled non-essential administrative overhead. Eleanor Vance was quoted, stating she had raised concerns about technical debt and undocumented systems years prior. Mr. Jonathan Harrison of Evergreen Capital was also quoted, detailing his formal letter expressing concern weeks before the breach, which went unanswered. That same day, 3 of Apex's largest clients, including Evergreen Capital, publicly announced they were terminating their contracts. Their press releases cited irreconcilable concerns about data security practices and a complete loss of trust in Apex's governance following the breach investigation. I didn't need to watch the stock price. LinkedIn told the story as Apex employees began updating their profiles en masse, signaling the corporate death spiral. Mason's profile updated too. Strategic Technology Advisor, it now read. No company listed. His tenure at Apex had lasted less than 3 months. At Guardian Defense, we were flooded with inquiries from former Apex clients looking for security advisory services. During one call, Mr. Harrison himself was on the line. "Ms. Chloe," he said, his voice tired but firm. "We thought we should call you first. We knew if anyone truly understood the system and how to build something secure, it was you." I took no pleasure in Apex's downfall. A company I'd helped build was crumbling, and hundreds of good people, like Daniel and Riley, would lose their jobs. But I felt a quiet, deep vindication. Security wasn't just overhead to be cut. It was the indispensable foundation of trust, and ignoring it had a steep price. 6 months later, Guardian Defense Corp's financial security practice had grown dramatically. Many of our new clients were former Apex customers. Several of my old colleagues had joined our team. Daniel was now my senior security engineer. Riley led client communications. Apex itself had been acquired for a tiny fraction of its former value, essentially purchased for its client list and lingering patents. The Apex brand name was retired, a cautionary tale in business school case studies about the catastrophic cost of neglecting cybersecurity. I ran into Alexander, the former CEO of Apex, at an industry conference in Vancouver. We ended up alone at the hotel bar after the sessions. "No hard feelings, Chloe?" he asked, raising his glass. "None, Alexander," I answered truthfully. It wasn't personal anymore. It was a harsh business lesson. Business decisions have consequences. Some are just more severe than others. He nodded, looking tired. For what it's worth, I fought against some of those changes. Tried to make Mason listen. Got outvoted. "That's boards for you," I said. He finished his drink. "Your new firm seems to be doing well." "We are," I confirmed. "You know what the real irony is?" Alexander said, a wry smile on his face. "Apex, or what's left of it under the new owners, is now paying Guardian Defense Corp 3 times your salary for security consulting to clean up the mess." I smiled slightly. "The cost of security always gets paid, Alexander. Either up front or after the fact. After is always more expensive." As he left, Alexander paused. "Mason," he landed at Nexus Global. Still pushing the same move fast philosophy. "Good luck to them," I said, a cold certainty settling in my gut. Back in Chicago, walking into Guardian Defense's offices on Monday morning, Natalie was waiting. "Chloe," she said, a hint of something in her eyes. "News just came in. Nexus Global had a significant security incident over the weekend. Their CISO is requesting emergency assistance." She looked at me, a question in her gaze. "Want to take the lead on this one? Given the circumstances?" I shook my head. It wasn't my fight, not anymore. It was just another predictable consequence. "Send the junior team, Natalie," I said. "They need the experience." It's a textbook case. That afternoon, I finalized the new client onboarding documentation for Guardian Defense. Clear, comprehensive, meticulously detailed. The section title, "Understanding Your Full Security Architecture, the Foundation of Trust." My father had been right about one thing. Job security wasn't about working for a big, stable company. It was about being the person who knew how to prevent the disasters that others were too blind, too arrogant, or too busy moving fast to even see coming. And that kind of expertise? That was always in demand.